Hello and welcome. It's a slightly different episode today. Usually I would start with a sting, but I think the sting is in this illness that we are going to discuss today. It's called pulmonary fibrosis. And you know what? It's affected my family just recently, but I know that it affects an awful lot more. The thing is that some illnesses, such as cancer, rightly so, get their place and they get a lot of airplay. However, this illness is serious and doesn't get the coverage that it should. Today, I am joined by, how can I describe him? An amazing individual. He is called Peter, and he is of the Pulmonary Fibrosis Trust. Peter, thank you so much for coming along and talking about this and sharing your story. But first off, what is your role with the Pulmonary Fibrosis Trust and how did it start and how did you get involved?
Yeah, first of all, hello. Thank you for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be here and to talk about this illness. My role with the Pulmonary Fibrosis Trust is that I'm currently the chairman. I first got involved with the trust back in 2013 when I was first diagnosed with this illness. And when I contacted the trust, I had an email from one of our trustees, who's still a trustee. I've never forgotten this, but she responded to my email at 1 o'clock in the morning. She worked during the day and did her emails at night time. She took the trouble to send me an email. And I was pretty desperate. All I knew was I had something that had a life expectancy of 3 to 5 years, which in my case, fortunately, hasn't been the case, but that is the average. There was no cure, and not many people knew about it. And I thought, this can't be right. And she contacted me to tell me that that is the worst case scenario. It's not always as bad as that, and gave me a little bit of hope. I've never forgotten that. And since then, I thought, well, let's try and do some more help and raise money for the trust, which is what I did. I got a thank you from the then treasurer, who unfortunately has passed away since, thanking me for raising the money. And I said, oh, I'm happy to help. Next question was, oh, happy to help, are you? How would you like to be an ambassador? We would like someone to organise oxygen for people going on holiday. Would you like to do that? I hadn't a clue what that involved. But that's how I started as an ambassador for the trust. And I've been with them since. And I think in 2016, February, I was appointed as trustee. That was quite surreal because there was only 3 trustees at the time. And I was asked to actually arrange the trustee meeting on behalf of those trustees. And I went along and 2 other people joined me who I didn't know who they were. And that they were going to be there, but the 3 extra people were appointed trustees, so we became 6 trustees, and 4 months later I was asked to be chairman, and I've been chairman since.
You're doing a grand job, may I say, Peter?
Well, it's what keeps me and others going, knowing that we're helping people who otherwise wouldn't get any help at all.
And that's what I want to come on to. But first, can you just explain a little bit about what is pulmonary fibrosis?
Right. I'm not a medical person, so I will keep it basic. Pulmonary fibrosis is a progressive lung disease that has no cure. As I said earlier, life expectancy average is about 3 to 5 years. There's absolutely nothing can stop this thing from happening. What it is, the fibrosis, it occurs in your lungs where the air sacs called alveoli are being destroyed by the illness, and it progresses. Nothing can stop that. So it just progresses until you suffocate. That is basically the illness. You are suffocating to death. I'm not trying to be too graphic, 'cause I know it's upsetting, but I can't put it any other way. Someone told me it's a bit like breathing through a straw. If you pinch your nose and put a straw to your mouth and start breathing through your straw, that is what it feels like getting towards the end stage of this illness. It is an awful, dreadful illness. And when I was first diagnosed, I couldn't believe that such a thing could exist, that no one knows about it.
No, because I think we hear a lot about maybe asthma, but I know just chatting to you earlier, you was giving me some statistics about asthma and pulmonary fibrosis.
Absolutely. 4 times more people die from pulmonary fibrosis than asthma. Asthma is not a nice illness. No illnesses are, and I do appreciate that. There's significantly more people have asthma, but the fact that so many people in relationship to that, percentage-wise, die from pulmonary fibrosis, it should be given more respect than it is given to them.
Do you also think the medical professionals, do you think sometimes they can misdiagnose this illness and maybe think that someone's got asthma, and then it takes a long time for people to get in the system to find out actually they have pulmonary fibrosis?
I think the biggest problem is initial diagnosis given by recognised respiratory doctors. I think they should be fairly quick in identifying pulmonary fibrosis. Normal diagnosis is done from a CT scan. So if a patient is showing indications that it could be something more that needs to be looked into, they will organise a CT scan. And even from an X-ray, they can indicate that something's not quite right and needs further investigation. The key is a CT scan, and from that they can diagnose pulmonary fibrosis.
If somebody's concerned now, what are the symptoms that somebody should be looking out for that could indicate that they should push maybe their GPs and nurses at the surgery a little bit harder to get a diagnosis?
I think it applies to any illness, I guess. If you're experiencing symptoms over and above normal symptoms, then that should alert you to certain problems. In the case of pulmonary fibrosis, it will be shortness of breath and doing easy stuff like carrying shopping, walking short distances. Now, some of that could be simply being out of condition. I understand that. But if you feel that is more apparent, that you're more noticed of becoming short of breath by climbing stairs and so on, that is a warning. But in my case, what alerted me is I had a horrendous cough that wouldn't go away. First appointment with the doctor, they just said, well, okay, these things take time. What do you normally say? So off I went, and I still had this cough. In fact, it got so bad and I was coughing so much, I caused a bruise to come track right across my body through this coughing. And I went back there and they said, okay, we'll send you up for an X-ray. Went up to hospital for an X-ray, and a short time afterwards had a phone call to say that they need to look into it more deeper, and invited me back for a CT scan after a couple of months. I went for the CT scan, then went back for the results, and I was in the room for about 2 minutes with this doctor. He looked at the results of the CT scan and said, oh yes, it's idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, progressive lung disease that has no cure. I looked a bit puzzled. By that time, I was feeling quite well, and I thought, well, it's just a formality. And he'd just say, well, no, you're fine. So I wasn't expecting that. And you could see I looked puzzled. And he said, let me write it down for you. And he wrote down a piece of scrap paper, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Gave me that piece of paper and said, have a look on the internet, and we'll see you in 6 months' time for a lung function test.
Wow.
So I came out of there. I thought, what's this? I'd heard of pulmonary fibrosis, and a lot of people have. But not knowing too much about it. And when, of course, I looked at Dr. Google, I was horrified. The first thing I saw was average lifespan 3 years. It's the first thing I saw. So your stomach hits the ground. I wasn't expecting that at all.
So someone is probably going to be watching this now, and they are absolutely just like you. They are bemused at the NHS at the moment, because I know I am. The person who I refer to got their diagnosis over the telephone, a quick one, and then had to go on their NHS app to even see it. Nobody bothered to speak to them. Nobody took the time to talk about it. This is fundamentally wrong and has to change, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I guess in some respects I was a little bit lucky, because my diagnosis is 2013. Having got that diagnosis, I made an appointment immediately with my doctor. In those days when you could do that.
Yeah.
And it was straightforward. And my doctor was absolutely horrified that I'd been diagnosed in such a way. And she immediately wrote off to the hospital complaining. They then called me in for a further appointment to explain it in more details. Nowadays, you don't even get the GP appointment. I mean, I would say to people, if you're concerned, make an appointment with your GP, but that's not straightforward these days, is it?
No, and this is the thing. People are going to go through a life change. It's a shock to the system, and then we're expecting Dr. Google to come along, which, Google has its place and is a help. But also, you've probably found that there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to Google and this illness.
Well, you're absolutely right. Everyone's different, and you can't always compare yourself with what it says in Google or what other people you know have got the condition, because people do vary. But an interesting fact, over 6,000 people die from this illness every year. Now, when you put that out there, that isn't in line with serious cancers. I believe it's more than what brain cancer people die from, and road traffic accidents and suicides and so on. It is a major killer in that sense. So why is so little known about it?
And this is where you are a beacon of light, because what the Pulmonary Fibrosis Trust does is you really are a little support network, and you are doing your best to raise awareness of this illness.
The warning signs of pulmonary fibrosis can be subtle, like a dry cough that won't go away. Or feeling out of breath after doing simple tasks like climbing stairs or carrying shopping. Learn to spot the signs before it's too late. Missing the signs could mean missing out. Pulmonary fibrosis has no cure. Recognizing the signs early can give you more time with the ones you love. A simple chest exam could be key in catching pulmonary fibrosis early. Don't wait. Help support the Pulmonary Fibrosis Trust today. Text PFT followed by your donation amount to 70085. Thank you.
I do apologise with people who have pulmonary fibrosis when they see that advert, because it is graphic. It basically concerns a person who dies from the condition. Now, people, if you got the illness, wouldn't want to see that. It's not aimed to them. It's aimed to people who do not know what the illness is, for them to appreciate that this is a serious concern and more has got to be done. So it is graphic, but it's trying to make that point that something extra has to be done to help people with this condition.
It's quite brutal, but then so's the illness, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's one of the complaints we had, that they don't want to see this happening. I don't want to hear about people dying. Now, unfortunately, one of the problems with being a charity like this is that we tend to hear of people who are getting towards end stage, perhaps, who are struggling with this illness. They're getting so little support from the NHS. It is disgraceful what's happening. And as I said right at the beginning, there's no cure. Funding for research is woefully inadequate. Now, we have been talking to MPs over the years, etc., and the general reply I get is that they've pumped so many billions into the NHS, they've done this, done that, but nothing specifically for pulmonary fibrosis, and it's forgotten. I think maybe, I don't know, I'm a cynic. It tends to affect, on average, middle-aged men, about 55, something like that. It tends to be. I suspect it's because it's getting towards older people. They're not going to bother.
That's absolutely horrific because, you know, everybody deserves good quality of life. My personal thought on this, and it is my personal thought, is that even if somebody is to be given, you've definitely got like the 3 to 5 years bracket, that quality of life is absolutely important. And the support there, not just for the patient, but for the family and everybody else around them.
Absolutely right. It's not just the patient, and we do say that we consider the carers as well as the patients. It's just as tough for them, having to sit there and basically not have been able to do anything to help and just simply watch. Incidentally, children can get this illness, and children have died from it, but it is even rarer. It tends to be older people. But so it could affect anybody at any time.
Just on that, what do you think that the causes are? What could be the triggers to this illness? Or is it still not really known?
Quite often it is known, but there's over 200 causes.
Wow.
It could be something you breathe in through the air, airborne viruses or something that can trigger it off. Certain drugs can cause it. Certain medical conditions can cause it. Now, quite often they don't know what causes it, and they call that idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Still pulmonary fibrosis, but idiopathic. Sometimes they do know the cause, but whether that helps them in coming up with any form of treatment or support for the patient, I don't know. I mean, to me, the ultimate treatment is a cure.
Yeah.
Anything else is just going to help make you a little bit healthier, live a bit longer, and so on. But we need a cure. We need research. We need money coming from the government. And we're not talking about the scraps of living left over from everyone else. And to me, respiratory health in the UK is probably the worst in Europe for funding. All European countries are far more better than us in investing in research and what have you. So when it is put into research for lung conditions, I don't think we'll even get a mention.
No.
And I don't know why, because it is more serious than a lot of cancers. In fact, I often hear people say they'd rather have cancer than pulmonary fibrosis, which sounds a strange thing to say. With cancer, fortunately, with the advances in technology and treatments, they're getting good results. And you can live with certain cancers. They can cure certain cancers. Pulmonary fibrosis, there is no cure.
There is some glimmer of hope on the horizon. I've been reading into it, and America seems to be really wanting to lead the charge. And I think it's quite a shame, because Britain, we have got top professors, medical people. You know, we should be cutting edge, and we're not. But yeah, I mean, there is some maybe glimmer of hope. I've heard of EnV101 and things like that in America, and we can but hope, because the trials are ongoing, but it's looking positive. And is that what, this trust does? We want to pump more money into this to get more research and trials to also help, as well as you supporting people.
Absolutely. I believe this drug is pioneered by Boehringer Ingelheim, a major company in developing drugs and things. And it's been reviewed by the Federal Drugs Agency, or something they call it in America. And it's been tried by them. And there are people in Europe who are part of that trial. Now, I've heard from people who have been put on this drug that it stopped the progress in its tracks. So not a cure,
but it's helping.
It's good as, if it doesn't get any worse, that's certainly a bonus. So to me, it's a major improvement.
So why are people in the NHS and the government not listening to this?
I don't know. I mean, COVID was an excellent example of what we can achieve. We were the world leader because of COVID and what we did in developing a vaccine. All resources were put into it. Why can't we do something like that with other conditions? Now, I believe that cure is not that far away. I hope it's not, but we just need to push it across the line. Why it isn't done, I don't know.
I mean, just talking about COVID there, the person in my life who has it, he was diagnosed last September. We're now February the following year, and still no consultant appointment, because the consultant has gone off with basically he's gone off with mental health issues due to what he saw in COVID. I mean, where do people, if they don't feel like they're getting anywhere with consultants, GPs, is it you guys who can give them some help?
We do what we can to help, but this has got to come from the NHS. It's got to come from government, and why they don't put the resources in, I don't know. I'm not going to be political, but I just find it's disgraceful that the NHS is in the state it is now. Why has it been allowed to get to this stage when people, when they need the NHS, it's not there for them? When someone has to wait 8-9 months for an appointment for a condition that he's been diagnosed, but nothing else has happened and won't happen, might well pass away before then. I have heard of cases. These antifibrotics, they're only prescribed by Centre of Excellences, which is a specialist hospital that has an ILD, interstitial lung disease. That's the name of the general disease. They have these specialist nurses. It can only be prescribed by those hospitals. Well, up until recently, NICE would not prescribe these drugs unless it fulfilled certain criteria. The reason for that is when they did the clinical trials, they did it for a specific type or group of people with pulmonary fibrosis. So everyone else is excluded. Well, now they're saying, well, everyone else shouldn't be excluded. So we can include them. So there was an immediate demand for this drug. That's put enormous pressure on the NHS, and they're waiting months. And I've heard of people who have been referred to a specialist hospital and have died in the meantime. I'm not saying they could, but it's quite possible they could still be alive had they been put on this antifibrotic drug.
And that's the thing that we want to really highlight here. If somebody's watching now and they are really frightened and they think there's nothing that can be done, I know that a lot of people who I've seen in like the groups and things talk about, well, can I be made comfortable? And there are the drugs available, but as you said, they have to be prescribed. Your GP can't do it.
Correct.
And so this is where all this education comes into, and where you have to almost fight your corner to get heard.
Pulmonary fibrosis is still a relatively rare illness. So if you went to a GP, most GPs will probably never come across a case of pulmonary fibrosis before. So they will struggle. It has to be looked at by a specialist respiratory doctor, ideally one who specializes in pulmonary fibrosis. It has to be done by the experts, and there's just not enough of them. So in the meantime, people are suffering, people are struggling, people are dying. I think it's around about 20 people a day die from pulmonary fibrosis, to put it in perspective. Now, I've raised this question to MPs, and in fact, my MP raised the question in the House of Commons back in February 2022, and it was to Sajid Javid, who was the then Health Secretary, and the question was, can more be done to help people with pulmonary fibrosis and find a cure and research? He acknowledged it was a major concern and more must be done, and he was going to talk to his officials to see what else can be done. I'm not aware of anything significant happening since then. I've had no feedback from it.
So gone under the radar, gone quiet, and it's like other things have taken precedence.
It has been resurrected recently. I'll come on to that, sorry. But just when that question was raised, a similar question was raised to Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was at the dispatch box as leader of the House. And the question was, how can we expedite this? And he suggested a question at Prime Minister's Question Time or a parliamentary debate will be a key to get this thing recognised at that top level. Now, at the time, I was absolutely delighted because for the first time, it's been recognised by at that level, which is where it should be. But the parliamentary debate and the question at Prime Minister's Question Time hasn't happened.
As far as the Pulmonary Fibrosis Trust goes, what is their role? What do they do for people who get in touch with them?
Right. First of all, on what we've been talking about is that we try and raise awareness wherever possible. We write to MPs. I've had meetings with MPs to try and get them on our side, for them to do something in Parliament. There have been some parliamentary events where MPs come along, so there's a presentation so they can look at it, get lots of sympathy. In fact, the last time I was there, October time, I think, in Westminster, I was talking to an MP, and her reply was, "Oh, it's just another worthy cause."
Oh.
Which didn't go down too well for me.
No.
And I thought, they're not really listening, are they? I think if they hadn't been aware of it or touched by it, then they don't. They tend not to. And fortunately, it is considered to be rare, but if they or one of their loved ones had this illness, I'm convinced they will think differently, because they wouldn't want anyone going through this condition. Even the senior medical people call it the dreadful illness. I don't know what else we can do to make more awareness, to get them to listen and say, look, you really got to look at what you're doing and what's happening, how people have to deal with this, how someone can suffocate to death over a period of time, and very little is done to help them. It's not acceptable. So raising awareness is one thing. I'm a member of the UK task force for lung illness, and through meetings with them, I'm trying to get them to try and help out by doing a bit more by their resources, to get more awareness and more things done to help patients with this illness. We visit various support groups to give talks about the charity and what we can do and so on. But that is to talk about what we can do to help them. We like to, well, first of all, emotional support. People ring up and they're frightened. As you can imagine, someone's just been diagnosed or someone's getting towards the end. They are scared. They will ring up for us to talk to. So we give them emotional support. We then give practical help to people. One of the things we do is mobility scooters. As the disease progresses, it's difficult for people getting out and about. Fresh air is obviously one of the best things they can do.
Yeah.
But they can no longer go great distances. Walking across the road is virtually impossible for them. It's very difficult. We will give them a mobility scooter. We'll contact them, find out what sort of scooter they need and what it's used for and so on. We will fund a scooter for them so they can stick in the back of the car, whatever, go around the garden centre or park, go on holiday, things they wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
So helping that quality of life.
Absolutely. And there's other aids we'll look at to help them. And one of the things we have a holiday home in Great Yarmouth. Am I allowed to say where it is? Or
Go on. Go and you tell everybody.
Right. It's the Haven site in Great Yarmouth called Seashore. And it is a fully equipped caravan, mains connected, double glazed, centrally heated, close to the beach and all the facilities that Great Yarmouth offer. It's got a ramp outside if they need for wheelchair access. And the on-site facilities are excellent. There's swimming pools, entertainment areas, shops and so on. And they get 15% discount on anything they buy on site. That's been a godsend, and it's been a phenomenal success for people wishing to go on holiday. It could either just be a couple or it could be a family. And grandparents can take their children for a holiday. Sadly, in some cases, it's their last holiday together. But they have this ability to if they need oxygen, if they're on ambulatory oxygen, they can have it delivered to the site, and it's in the caravan waiting for them when they arrive. So it has been a phenomenal success, and it fills up very quickly throughout the year.
You also have some very famous people championing this cause, which is fantastic. Name drop. Go on, Peter.
Right. Well, we're actually delighted that our patron is none other than Alan Roux, famous chef. As it happens, I mean, his restaurant, The Waterside, has held a Michelin 3 stars for 39 years. This evening, we hope it'll be 40 years.
So do I, Alan.
Because tonight is a ceremony in Glasgow, which is a world record outside of France. And Alan is an incredibly nice fella. Sadly, his father, Michel Roux, passed from pulmonary fibrosis back in 2020. And it's for that reason Alan is dedicated to do what he can to help us and people with this illness. And already he's been a marvellous ambassador for us and hopefully will continue to be so, which is great. I mean, if they're not rich or famous, then he won't know them because he knows everybody. Even the Queen died at his restaurant. In his what he calls his library, used to be Michel Roux's lounge, is a glass cabinet with a handwritten note from Queen Elizabeth II thanking them for their hospitality. So you don't get much higher than that, do you?
You don't. And that's Alan, you're a good egg for doing that.
Lovely man.
So how can other people, maybe they're not so famous amongst us, how can we get involved and help the Trust?
Well, raising awareness is one thing. Write to your MP, tell them you've heard about this condition and more must be done. And what they're doing is woefully inadequate. That's one thing. But also donations would help us to continue the work. We rely totally on donations. I mean, as trustees, we don't get paid a single penny for what we do. It's all voluntary. So we have to rely on the donations to fund the scooters and the other mobility aids that we supply and the help we give patients and so on. So we would very much welcome people to donate to us, no matter how small. We're always grateful. And details of how to donate to us are on our website, which is pftrust, or www.pftrust.org. Information on the illness is on there.
It's a great support network you've got, and I can only imagine that there has been some positive impacts to the work that you're doing for the people who suffer from this.
Absolutely. We get wonderful testimonials, which is what keeps us going.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an awful illness to deal with, and is suffering out there, but there are a lot of lovely people that we've had to deal with. And sadly, a lot of the people I've known have passed away. But knowing that we are making a difference to some people's lives, I wish I can give them a cure. I wish I can get more donations for research and what have you. We need millions.
I will certainly put that to my church on the prayer list as well, that comes to you, because I want to thank you for all you've done for the individual involved in my life who has it. I can't thank you enough for that support and that kindness that you've given. Peter, I thank you for coming in today.
That's my pleasure.
And if you have been affected by what you have just listened to, you're not alone. There are other people who are going through the same as you, and this amazing trust is also there to help. But let's continue to raise awareness, and let's find a cure. Only by a lot of raised voices and a lot of action can that happen. So we're going to put all the details on the screen for you now of where you can get help, but also where you can make a significant impact for the future for this disease. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.